Hello and welcome to The Right Idea, where we discuss the people, policy, and politics that drive Texas. I'm your host, Brian Phillips. I'm the Chief Communications Officer at the Texas Public Policy Foundation. And with me is our Chief Research Officer, Derek Cohen. Derek, this is really the nerd contingent of TPPF because today our guest is Andrew Brown, who's the head of our policy. Some would say. Bald Derek is our guest today.
Very high in.
We've got policy, we've got research, we've got comms, we've got text led. Just going to get super nerdy today. But it looks like you've taken the rest of session off since you're not wearing a jacket, not wearing a tie. Usually you're like in a three-piece suit, so it's actually very different. No, not even the vest.
Well, as you know, if you're going up to building on the crossover deadline day, you're already cooked.
Yeah, that's it.
So I was about to say, I know that there are certain members who wear guayabara to their committee hearing, so I'm echoing that in spirit.
So we're just hoping that like lobbyists aren't jumping out the windows and stuff like that. They're just taking their eyes off.
Depends on which ones.
Ties off. All right, well, we'll get to all that because that's going to be fun here in a second. But one game that likes to get that folks on the inside like to play is, today is the last day. Well, why don't we set it up? Today is the last day that you can get your bills through the House.
Bills through the House.
House bills through the House if they haven't gone through a second reading, right?
Correct.
And you have until 11:59 tonight, so midnight tonight, or else your bill's dead, right? And but when at the start of the day, there's a huge stack of pages that have all the bills in order of how they're going to get through them.
I think it's a 28-page calendar today.
20 calendar, right? Thank you for that technical term. But yeah, 28-page calendar, and the game is to pick which page you think they'll end on at 11:59. So I ask you, I've heard that the third readings are almost already done, and that's through 9 or 10 pages. So as of right now and this afternoon,
came in at 10, so it took them about 4 hours.
So between now, so you got about 9 hours left, or whatever the math. You don't do math on camera. About 10 hours left. Derek, do you have a number? You think we know what page they're going to be on?
Well, look, now that you'd be shocked to find out that there's gambling going on in this establishment, but
especially from the guy who wrote the paper about it.
Friendly betting.
Yeah. As long as we don't do it 5 or more times, it's not commercial, so it's fine.
Excellent.
But we actually, we took friendly bets upstairs on that, or we took a little Post-it, printed out the whole calendar, and then put a Post-it note where put our name on it and put where we're supposed to finish. If they're already through to like 10 pages, I'm cooked. Like I was like on page 13 or 14. So
okay.
Which actually that was. I mean, I'm sorry, but that's smart money.
Yeah,
that's smart money given past performance.
Not a lot of faith in getting through. That's the smart money.
Not a lot of faith in getting through second reading on the last day, Brian. No, not at all.
Not getting through even a substantial portion of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, the funny thing is, and I mean, you saw the chubbing does seem a little bit.
It's lighter.
It's lighter, but I also think it's just like, I think there's less. There's more of a submission. There's more of a give up.
Well, the hard part about this exercise is you're always looking for what's the most controversial thing, right? Every session, just about, there's something on the calendar, and it's usually far down the calendar, that the minority party hates and they want to kill. And a lot of times it's a bill that's given as a sacrificial lamb. I don't see anything on the calendar today that I'm like, okay, that's the thing. Yeah. That's the one they're trying to prevent.
There's a couple past 20, but I could never see them getting 20 deep.
Yeah, no. So you're out at 13.
I'm on 12.
Bet? You're on 12.
I think we both. Are unfortunately hammered that under.
Yeah.
No.
So since I didn't pick yet, and I know what's going on, I'm going to go with 18, just to see if I can win.
What gambling's bad.
Yeah. All right. That's the hot take for today. The shameless plug is, as always, texaspolicy.com/the post. It's our newsletter that we put out every week. It's got exclusive information in it. It's got some fun stuff about Texas, and then all the goings on in Texas, our hot takes, things like that, but other more serious issues that we put together. It comes out every Thursday, and you can subscribe at texaspolicy.com/the post. Okay. As I've already introduced Andrew runs our policy shop here at the Texas Public Policy Foundation, and since we're only a few weeks away from the session ending, we thought we'd have you in to kind of do like a lightning round towards the end of the show. But one of your big issues, one of the issues that you started on here at the foundation, is still very much in your area of responsibility, is foster care, and it's one of those issues that doesn't get a whole lot of attention because we're always talking about taxes or education or healthcare or other things, but it is obviously a very big issue. It doesn't really make the headlines unless there's some horrific thing that happens in the foster care system. And but the president has designated this month, May, to be Foster Care Month. And so we thought we wouldn't let Foster Care Month go by without having Yin come and telling us about the current state of foster care here in Texas, which, just to set it up a little bit, the relationship that Texas has had with foster care has been a little turbulent over the last few decades, to say the least. But you're optimistic about it. You said there's been some big changes. So take us through kind of, you don't have to do the whole history and the whole sordid, horrific history of some of it, but kind of where things stood and what reforms that were made and kind of where they are now.
Yeah, so for Texas, really, this impetus on reform in our foster care system started somewhat in 2011 when a lawsuit was filed against the state, essentially alleging that our foster care system was so bad that we were violating the constitutional rights of kids in care. The plaintiffs won that suit against the state in 2015.
Violating the Texas Constitution or the U.S.?
The U.S. Constitution.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, it was a federal lawsuit. And so the plaintiffs actually won. And the judge in the case determined, yeah, in fact, the conditions were so bad for kids in care that we were violating their constitutional rights. And that was the catalyst that basically woke up everyone in Texas to say, we've got to fundamentally transform this system. We've got to make major changes. So in 2017, TPPF really helped lead the charge on restructuring the foster care system, moving it towards a community-driven model where it's not a centralized bureaucracy in Austin that's serving kids, it's community nonprofits. Now, working in collaboration with the state because these kids are in the legal custody of the state when they come into foster care. But the services, the work with the kids is actually led by nonprofits and service providers in the communities where these kids live. And that's been a long restructuring. It's been a long rollout. I think overall we've seen some positive development. But we got a big shot in the arm toward reimagining what the child welfare system as a whole looks like under the first Trump administration. And he actually mentioned this in his proclamation. During the first Trump administration, he signed something called the Family First Prevention Services Act. And for me, and again, I'm biased here because I live and breathe child welfare issues. For me, it was one of the most transformational things that the Trump administration did in that first term. Sorry, First Step Act.
I was going to say, easy here.
Well, everyone, no, it's okay. Everyone knows about the First Step Act. Let them know about the Family First Step.
But what that did was it shifted our priority away from, okay, the foster care system exists to remove kids and keep them safe, to we need to be keeping families together. The work that we need to be doing should be prioritizing keeping kids out of foster care unless it's absolutely necessary because we know that kid's been harmed, or if we don't pull that kid out of the home, they're going to be harmed.
And you've done some interesting research, and I'm sure there's others that exist, in that idea of what do the statistics and what does the data say about the results of pulling kids out and putting them into foster homes versus trying to keep them in an intact family, and having the various agencies and counselors work with the family as they stay together. What does the data show when you compare those two situations?
Yeah, what we know, when you remove a kid from their family for any length of time, you have caused harm to that child at the moment of removal. And that's long-term trauma that they're going to carry with them. And it manifests in different ways: higher mental health issues, higher rates of criminality, more substance use disorders, more likely to be in poverty, any imaginable negative outcome you can think of for a child.
Educational issues.
Yeah, educational issues, all of that. The act of removing that child is that first marker, that first step toward these trauma reactions that the kid will carry with them for the rest of their lives. Now, what you have to do then is balance that decision. You have to ask yourself the question, is the harm that we know we're going to cause this kid when we pull them out of their family and put them in foster care, is that harm less than the harm that would be caused to that kid if we allowed them to remain in the home? And that's a difficult decision to make. And so a lot of the work that we've done on the policy front in TPPF is trying to put up the right guardrails within the law to guide social workers who have to make these decisions, to guide judges who have to approve these decisions in determining, is this removal in fact warranted, or are there other tools available to us to protect this kid from something bad that might happen in the future while still keeping them with that family. And it's been really interesting to see over the last 4 to 5 years, really, the whole system has shifted. Initially when we got into this work, we were the distinct minority, and it was always our ideas were going to kill kids.
Right. I can see you being attacked for saying, look, the whole point is that there's something wrong with the family. Get the kid out of there before they get hurt or killed. Or,
better safe than sorry. Intervene first.
Right.
And then, if we made a mistake, okay, no harm, no foul. Well, what we realized was, big harm if you made a mistake in that decision. But what's been really interesting to see is as these reforms have taken root, the people who were saying, oh, this is going to kill kids are now coming back and saying, oh, no, family integrity is good. We want to preserve families. We want to keep kids in homes and provide wraparound services, right? The language we've been using, our messaging that folks in the family integrity world have been using for decades is now mainstream, which is really cool to see, that to shift that conversation and to shift the way that people think about this system has been really rewarding to be a part of. And we're seeing data coming back now that's proving that these things are actually working. So 2 sessions ago, we made some pretty sweeping changes to the standards regarding removal. We redefined neglect in state code to make sure that when you're removing a child for neglect, that neglect is not just this amorphous whatever you think it is, but it actually has meaning. That meaning is keyed to actual harm or risk of harm to the child. So as a result of that reform and several other reforms that the Texas legislature passed, we've seen the number of kids in foster care drop dramatically. I think the last number I saw was about 40%. We've seen fewer removals of kids into foster care. The corollary data to that is we're looking at, and it's a really morbid thing to talk about, but we look at the annual child death reports. How many kids do we know have been killed or seriously injured as a result of abuse or neglect? Those numbers have actually gone down slightly since the reforms took effect. And so
leaving the kid, the philosophy of leaving the kids, with the parents and trying to fix the family, essentially, you've seen the incidents go down, which would have been opposite of what they would have argued.
Yeah, the initial data that we can point to and say, okay, these are the results from the reforms, is showing us that it's working. And credit to the Department of Family and Protective Services for embracing a lot of this.
Now, is this something that Texas, and maybe jump in on this too, Derek, but is this something that Texas has pioneered? Is this, or are we taking ideas from other states, or and then maybe it's it's or other states are seeing what we're doing and hadn't, so I read something that said we've revolutionized foster care. Are other states looking at what we're doing and then taking our ideas?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's folks all over the country that are thinking about this. I'm in multiple work groups and email groups where folks are sharing ideas about what they're doing in their states. Texas is by far out front on this, to the point where in a lot of these groups, they're asking the questions like, how is Texas able to pull this off? Because it's a really interesting dynamic where it's not a clear left-right issue. The members of these groups represent the full political gamut. You have folks like us that are, solid conservatives. You have libertarians. You have very progressive liberals, all uniting around a set of principles. Now we come at it from, different convictions and different beliefs about the way the world should work. But when we come down to, well, what's the right solution? Right? We have a lot of agreement. And I have counterparts that are on the far left who are saying, well, how is Texas doing all of these really progressive things? And I said, because they're not progressive. These aren't progressive ideas.
Wow.
These are well-researched, quite frankly, limited government ideas, because what we're talking about is limiting the ability of government to insert itself into a family in a very dramatic, controlling way.
Yeah.
And so I've been invited to go up to New York. I was there last year, and they were bringing me around to meet with their legislators on a few bills that we had passed in Texas. And it was like being marched around like, hey, look, here's a conservative.
We agrees with them. Derek, we've got conservatives, liberals, dogs, cats living together. Like it's total chaos.
I was about to say, yeah, no, I mean it is a bit reminiscent of the criminal justice thing, because even if you do have different starting points, you come to if you agree on the goals, oftentimes your path will intersect, at least temporarily. So, and I think that credit to Trump for both the Family First Act and the First Step Act, because I think those both illustrate. Those are both manifestations of that particular principle. And I think, if you look at where we're looking now with, the federal government, who knows, we might see, a left-right agreement on, college athletics or something like that. I mean, 47 is still cooking, so we'll see.
That is a good question. At the national level, you really don't hear anything about foster reform, foster care reform, right? But just because you would think that this is much more of a state, if not a hyper-local issue in some cases. Are there initiatives like, you keep bringing up First Step Act, but First Step Act was a product of the states, specifically places like Texas. Is there some sort of like national model for this that where Republicans and Democrats could agree on something?
It's very similar. Child welfare is very much a state-driven function. Now, what Family First did was it looked at the funding mechanisms that go to the states from the federal government. And so you have things like Title 4E is a major source of funds that the federal government sends to the states so that they can run their foster care system. Those funds always come with strings and guidelines attached to them. What Family First did was it loosened a lot of those strings and said, okay, rather than using this money solely to keep a kid in foster care, you can now start using this money for programs that are designed to keep that child with their family. Things like the Adoption and Safe Families Acts, the Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act. These are all really funding bills. Now you'll have debates about, can we get some new innovative program or into these when they're up for reauthorization, and try to get states to experiment with different types of interventions or types of support services. But generally speaking, those have worked in other states, and let's see if we can do an experiment where we get all of the other states to adopt what Texas did or what Florida did.
So back to Texas, if we've revolutionized the system, things are working in the right direction. We're having tremendous results and dramatically, improving the outcomes. What's left to do? There are still some bills that are roaming through Congress. So I'm not sure through the Texas legislature. Not sure where they are at this moment. With 10 hours left. But what is the work left to do here in Texas?
Yeah, and we've taken a ton of ground. And a lot of what we're doing is fine-tuning. It's even trying to see if we can push further beyond these big reforms that we've made. But this session, there's really been a focus on how do you improve the actual foster care system itself. Because one of the byproducts of this federal lawsuit was a recognition that we have piled regulation upon regulation upon regulation on the agencies that serve kids and the families that sign up to be foster families or adoptive families, that it was becoming so burdensome that we were starting to lose the people who wanted to serve kids. And it became a bit of a crisis a couple of years ago where we were having more kids coming into care than we had places to put them. And that really sparked another move of reform to figure out how do you get an adequate supply of placements for kids. And we started by looking at, the regulatory system. Everything we're being told by child serving agencies and by families is we don't know what's expected of us, and we're just constantly being penalized and told by
we don't know what you should do, but that's not it, and we're going to whip you.
And here's a citation.
Yeah,
right. We were wearing them out, and so during the 88th legislature, we worked with Senator Sparks and Representative Frank to pass a bill that basically said, okay, let's study it, right? And study bills are usually kind of a nothing burger. This one we structured in a way that said we're bringing in somebody from the outside and we're giving them very clear milestones that they need to meet. They need to tell us what can we cut from our regulations. I mean, I really viewed it as a repealer bill. What regulations can you cut? What laws can you change that will reduce the regulatory burden on the system and the people who want to help kids and families through the system while still maintaining child safety as our top priority? That report came back. A lot of what was in that report, DFPS and HHSC are already doing. They could do it unilaterally.
Nice.
They didn't
Okay.
need legislative approval.
Yeah.
There's a few things that need some legislative approval and some reforms in the law. That bill, House Bill 2789, it's passed the House. It's been heard in the Senate. It'll be on the Senate floor probably here within the next week.
So it's cleared all the hurdles. We don't need to worry about that one today.
Yeah, it's not on the
Okay.
chopping block today.
All
we
right,
got
that's great.
that out, and we've already got it heard. Another one that I really love is Senate Bill 855, and this was in response actually to an idea that was brought to us by a former foster parent who actually happens to be on our board of directors. We were hanging out having a conversation. He said, you know what one of the most annoying things was for us when we were providing foster care? I could take my biological kids to their pediatrician for a regular checkup. I couldn't take my foster kids to that same pediatrician because I have to use the state Medicaid program that my foster child's on. And so we had to rearrange our lives, go all the way across town because there's only a handful of doctors in our community that would accept the child's Medicaid. And so we worked on a bill that basically says foster parents have the right to obtain medical care for their foster child outside of the state Medicaid program. If they can get their private insurance to take the foster child and cover the foster child, they can do that. If they want to pay out of pocket,
That was going to be my first question. Is it prohibited that the foster kids can be on the
Right.
foster mom and dad's private insurance?
what's really interesting is there's nowhere that I could find where it was affirmatively prohibited. It was just the practice of, no, you have to do it through Medicaid.
Okay.
You know, there's some reasons behind that, and we had to work with that in the law because every child has what they call a health passport that follows them. It's their medical care history, and that medical history follows that child. And so if you're going through providers who are in this network, then it's a seamless pass-through of the records to the agency. You know, basically you just build into the law that says if the foster parent elects this option, then they're just under the obligation to make sure that they work with the agency to get all of that the records for that child incorporated into the child's health passport. Overwhelming support from this bill.
Yeah.
From amongst members, amongst foster families, people who are working, in the system. I almost said industry, and I hate the way that sounds.
Right.
The department even worked really well with us on making sure that the way we structured it was something that they could easily comply with.
And where's this bill at now?
That bill's on the governor's desk right now.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
Okay.
Senate Bill 855.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
All right. No, and he's not vetoing it, right?
Hopefully not.
Well, that's great. I don't know if I want to call it a healthcare passport after what we just went through with vaccine passports.
Oh my gosh,
So
yeah.
maybe we work on the comms a little bit on that. Also, the last question I want to ask about this, and this kind of going back to what you were talking about. I mean, the word nonprofit's kind of a bad word. I mean, ever since Doge and all of that, like, what kinds of organizations are the ones that you're talking about with your community-based care?
Yeah, for the most part, these are organizations that have a long history of providing foster care services in their communities. We call them child placing agencies. Many of these are faith-based. When you look at the data on who serves, religious people, religious organizations are amongst the most likely to foster or adopt or have ministries, nonprofit organizations that are designed to serve foster children. And so, really what the vision of this is finding these organizations who are already doing good work in their communities. They have deep community roots and ties, so that they're not going to just up and leave if they feel like, oh, well,
Right.
The bottom line doesn't work.
Well, that's really good to hear. I think Texas is doing a heck of a job celebrating foster care month, and that it's been working on this for now a decade and gotten to a really, really good place because it was pretty bad for a long time.
It was rough. There's still more work to do, but I'm optimistic.
All right. Well, hang with us. We're going to get to, I don't know if I've got a bunch of stuff I want to ask you guys about just because we're getting close to the finish line and bills are starting to move and starting to go to the governor's desk and all of that. So I just kind of ask you about it. But just in general, our friends over at the Texan have a headline right on the front page of their website today, "The Bell Tolls," right? We talked about that already. The first deadline to pass legislation in the Texas House is Thursday night at midnight. That's tonight, at which any bill that hasn't received initial approval is dead for the rest of the session. So what is the scene up there? I'll start with you, Derek. So you've been patiently waiting to get after this. But
You never asked me about all my thoughts on foster care.
you jump in, man.
No, obviously I'm kidding. Anytime Andrew talks about that subject, I find myself learning
I know
an awful lot.
Do a whole another segment.
But yeah, I mean, essentially, that's you summarized it correctly. Is that you basically have, a time certain that once the clock ticks over, that even though Moody's going to do his usual thing where he moves to that they observe El Paso time because they're in the Mountain Time Zone, which give an extra hour to not pass any bills.
Clever.
But,
does that ever work?
No.
Okay.
It's patently illegal. I'm pretty sure you can't change horses midstream. But no, I was about to say, but once we make Texas time, there you go. El Paso will be brought to heel. That being said, is essentially it's as funny. It's like these fits and starts. We were talking earlier about chubbing, which is just. Speaking, how did we say this parliament in a parliamentary way? Speaking deleteriously on a item of legislation so as to run out the clock. But you only want to do that on ones where, you could actually make some hay on it. Because there's one thing that I have noticed. Chubbing also identifies the members who just maybe don't have that fastball, whether it's anymore or ever had. You just essentially see they'll get up there and they'll just ask like the most redundant questions. And it's like, it's not even interesting. Like if you're going to try to stall and delay and do all that, entertain us.
Right.
We are not entertained.
Yeah.
And so, but like we said earlier, we're seeing less of that, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it does seem like chubbing is less significant this session. It goes back to what I was saying earlier. I think there's not a lot left on the calendar that the minority party is really frothing at the mouth to kill.
Is there? Can the speaker or whoever's acting as the speaker at the time, do they have any procedural authority when they notice someone's like, excuse me, can you tell me what the third word or in the second paragraph or the fifth page is? Asking dumb questions.
Do they have authority? They can drop the gavel on. They can drop the gavel on any sort of dilatory action or motion
if it's just clearly wasting time and has no substance. Then they can. Drop that.
But it's up to the members, though. I mean, they always have that. Loaded gun in their side pocket if they want to call the question on any particular measure. So that right there.
Maybe this is an obvious question, but then why wouldn't if you're the majority party, why wouldn't you just put all the minority bills at the end of the calendar? And then they would have an incentive to get through everything because otherwise the bills that they want to have passed. They'll get, it feels like there's some sort of motivation for them to get through the list.
That's an interesting question raised by Calendar's chair, Brian Phillips here. No, it's obviously the machinations of calendars. It just usually prevents that from happening. I mean, everyone thinks that it's this like synthesis, this completely baked thing, but no. I mean, they get on the calendar when they get on the calendar, and most of it comes via. I mean, if it's not something that's special, if it's not an emergency item, if it's not a major state item. Yeah. Then it's pretty much just subject to, your call be answered in the order in which it's received and just kind of stirred into the wider pot.
What's been the most... Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, and people forget that the majority of bills that end up passing have very strong bipartisan support. Right. I mean, I've been noticing this session especially a lot of bills, more so than I've seen in the past, with 100+ votes in the House. And that's showing you that if it's getting to the floor... then you've got bipartisan support. There have been a few like strict party line votes, but not as many as I've seen in the past.
Yeah, and those are the ones you see. So that's what you have the primacy in your mind.
This is only my 4th session, so I don't have quite the history that a lot of people do around here. What do you think, and it could be a different answer for each of you, what is the most significant bill that died as a result of chubbing or as a result of the delay and all of that over the years? Something that absolutely was like a controversial top of the front page issue that just died because of this process.
It doesn't work like that.
No?
If it's something that's really big, really major, it'll have the force to get onto the calendar sooner. Now, obviously, last year with SB 14, when it started getting blown up in the House,
Which one was that?
That was gender modification.
Okay, yeah.
And that was after that was crossed over from the Senate to the House, and so despite the points of order of, we'll say, varying
Validity.
varying validity. They were able to bring it back to the calendar with a little bit of time to spare, simply because it already meet that crossover deadline. But
And it was over before the House bill deadline.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. Yeah. And so, but that's the whole point. If there's something that's that big, and it's on, it gets set on a calendar, we'll say three calendars before the last day. And so since they never clear out the other calendars, it gets rolled to that last day. If it's there, it's not a priority of the chamber, which means that it probably wasn't going to pass in the first place.
Now, I will say from last session, though, related to SB 14, there was a bill that would require insurance companies that covered transition services to also cover detransition services.
That bill passed this year, right?
It passed this year.
Yeah.
It was the bill that was next up when midnight hit. It was the one that I think the Democrats really wanted to kill because they couldn't kill SB 14, but they could kill that one.
Yeah, right.
For 18 months.
For 18 months, right.
And they came back stronger. Yeah. Like I said, it's only my 4th session, but I have been told several times throughout the years that nothing is really, really for really, really dead until sine die. And is that true? Has that been your experience? That there are ways, whether you want to reveal them or not, here on a show, there are ways that if your bill doesn't make it through second reading, that there are ways to figure out a way to get it into a Senate bill or to the conference or other mechanisms,
or just create a Senate bill. Do you want to take that one?
Well, did that actually happen on, what was it, Wednesday or Tuesday?
These are the dark arts of the Texas Ledge. Like, how much do you want to reveal here before?
So you have to keep in mind, I assume Brian, and then of course Jefferson can do the soundbite over it. You've seen Pirates of the Caribbean, I assume.
I have, yeah.
So the chambers don't so much have rules as they do have guidelines. So the issue, of course, being that obviously the Senate is in practice of suspending the rules all the time just to go about their daily business, whereas the House, it's more of a, it's usually more of an eye-catching thing. Both chambers can suspend the rules. They're at varying thresholds depending on what it is they're trying to do, but both chambers can do that. And we saw that there was a bill that was introduced in the Senate. It was either Tuesday.
It was Tuesday.
Tuesday of this week, which is a month or plus after the filing deadline. And that's because they can go, oh yeah, we're just going to suspend the rules and do it.
Yeah.
Now it also helps that it was a replacement for the bail bills, which those also get voted out of the chamber 29-2, So no matter what conceivable threshold you need to meet, they're already there.
Yep.
House, again, is a little tougher to get there. But even so, let's say that we're not suspending any rules and we're playing by the rules exactly. I can't remember the actual bill number. It was one of Senator Burton's bills in 2015 that became what was known as a cruise ship.
A cruise ship?
Because
that's different than a Christmas tree.
Because everything got loaded on there. And honestly, it was germane because it generally became a criminal justice bill, but it had overcrim, it had felony theft thresholds, it had all this different stuff in it that got added in the end. So if you can add something in that is germane, as per the parliamentarian, that is something that you can always do within the scope of the existing bills. And I'll hand over to my colleague here for the rest of the dark arts.
Yeah, and that's something that we do regularly at this time of year, is we look at what bills do we have that we know aren't going to make it. And then we start looking for bills that are still moving, still have momentum, they're still alive, to figure out, can we get all or part of one of our bills attached to it? Now, you have to, in the Senate it doesn't matter, but in the House, their rules do matter. And so you do have to make sure that it is germane to the subject of the bill you're trying to attach to, meaning it advances the purpose of the bill that you want to attach it to.
Or at least you can make a good argument.
Or you can make a good argument, right? And so I've been sitting down with folks this week just going through list after bill and like looking at their bill next to the one they want to attach it to figure out, okay, what's the argument that I'm going to make? Is this all in the same realm of logic that it advances the same policy? And then start putting the language in. You then have to go to the bill authors and make sure, hey, are you okay with this?
Yeah.
You get their permission to do it, then you can move.
Now, somebody has a point of order against it because they think it's not germane. The parliamentarian sustains the point of order. Is that right?
Technically, it's the chair, actually.
Or the chair does.
The parliamentarian is an advisory role to the chair.
So I know in Congress, it's got way more experience with that. In Congress, you can appeal the ruling of the chair. Can you do that in the Texas Ledge too?
They did that once in the Senate. Because remember, calling a point...
it's kind of a nuclear option for sure. But like,
also, calling a point of order in the Senate's also like,
right.
I was about to say, we're a family podcast.
Yeah, you can, but you have to meet a vote threshold.
You should spend more time with your family.
Yeah.
Well, this is what my wife is telling me a lot lately.
Yeah, you should talk to your wife about spending more time with you.
So I remember it was last session, even though we did have, I think, one or two called this session. But it was last session, and Lieutenant Governor goes, "Oh, we'll put this up to a vote," and then just like you want to roll these dice?
Right. Because then everybody who votes against the chair is in a bad. But in the U.S. House, I mean, everything's so chaotic up there now. It's like pretty old hat for them to if they needed to, they would have this vote all the time, and they would probably lose. But I mean, who cares? That doesn't matter because it's Congress.
Yeah, so they're not passing anything to begin with.
Exactly. All right. Well, fascinating stuff. We're going to get into kind of a lightning round because we only have about 15 minutes left, but there's just some bills that I wanted to a lot of stuff has gotten through, has passed. I love your reactions on some of this stuff. The one that jumps out to me is the elimination of the STAAR test. I mean, this has been controversial for a long time. I think gradually Republicans came around to opposing the STAAR test as long as the result wasn't no test. I think that's where the public education advocates, we'll say charitably, kind of started, which was like, stop testing. We don't need any testing. But now you've gotten this sort of movement to, okay, fine, the STAAR test isn't it. That's not what's going to happen. But instead of a STAAR test, now we have 3 tests that are going to happen throughout the semester. Anyway, just get your thoughts on this. It was, what was it, 139 to 1 or something that ultimately eliminated the STAAR test. Didn't it seem like we've come a long way on that one, and it's pretty important to parents?
Well, and I think that just speaking broadly from the policy perspective is that nobody is wedded to the STAAR test, right? And that was just the mechanism that they had in place, and obviously it had a lot of demonstrated shortcomings. And so, credit to Chairman Buckley for going back and saying, okay, well, what's an alternative? Because the reason we have a STAAR test to begin with is because we got rid of, what was it, tax or whatever that was before that? Oh my goodness.
Well, I forget what I even took when I was in school. Something.
Yeah, and so the reason, so they had a previous model and they went to that because this was just, we need to have some sort of, for accountability purposes, whether it's a federally mandated issue or a state mandated issue, we need to have some form of accountability to make sure kids are learning something, right?
Right, yeah.
And engaging for it. The only problem is then when we try to, again, much like our argument for school choice, when we have a unitary model of what that looks like and we foist it upon everybody, it works for some, probably even works for most. But even most, if it's at 51%, means 49% are being ill-served by it.
Right.
And so I think they're trying to go with something that still has that accountability component. Because everyone says that they're for accountability, except when A to F ratings come out. Everyone says they're for accountability. This is, I think, a good faith effort by Chairman Buckley to find a less intrusive way of establishing that.
Yeah, I've always contended that the two animating principles of public education are the money always comes in and it always goes up, and there's no accountability for how it's used or the results that the kids get. Right. But so that's why this kind of is man bites dog here, because at least the Democrats and the various public education advocates are coming around to say we do need a test, or we do need a testing regime of some kind. So that's positive. Thoughts on STAAR test before I jump to the next lightning round?
Yeah, and I don't want to overstep and speak for our education team. I haven't talked with them about how they
you're
feel.
The policy guy
about
here.
the
You can
plan.
say whatever you want. That's why we're having you
Tell
on
them
here.
what to think, Andrew.
Jeez.
Use your power.
What Chairman Buckley laid out to me made a lot of sense, right? This we called it a multiple test thing, but really it's a checkpoint, right? Let's assess them when they come in, figure out where they are, assess the kids halfway through, figure out how much progress they've made, and identify what they need to work on so that we can get them to where they need to be by the time they leave the grade, right? One of the biggest complaints that really animated the school choice movement was so many kids are not reading or doing math on grade level. And so having multiple checkpoints with each kid throughout the course of the year that don't necessarily impact whether or not they can move on, but enables you to customize that education for that child so that they can meet those milestones.
We had tests every 6 weeks when I was in school.
Yeah.
Do they don't do that anymore? Like every 6 weeks you had some units that you had to read, or you had various sections of math or whatever, and then it was about every 6 weeks they would test you.
I think it was an overcorrection from that, because they basically wanted to load it up into like one very strong high stakes test, and that's where some of the all those problems that have come from.
So I'm gonna stay on education. This is one near and dear to my heart because it happened right up here up the road. But SB 2927 passed. Campus protesters are now banned from using loudspeakers during class hours, setting up encampments, and replacing the American or Texas flag on campus flagpoles. It does a bunch of other things, but basically all of the protests that were happening up there, a lot of that was already illegal anyway. The encampments and things like that, but this just strengthens the hand of administrators on public universities to say, look, we're not going to put up with trying to interfere with classes and create massive disruptions. I think this is an overall super positive way to get at the problem.
Unfortunately, my amendment was not accepted, which was put them all in cages.
That would be.
Would that qualify as an encampment?
There's always next session. Andrew, that's what I would like to say. But I think, going after this, I actually think the University of Texas handled their protests pretty well. But as you see, it's still going on. I mean, places like Columbia and all these other wackadoodle universities. But I think, Texas wants to lead on this issue. So I think that was great, even though there was a lot of protesting coming from campuses on this bill. Let's see, what else did we get? Anything on? I mean, I got taxpayer funded lobbying. Got bail to talk about. Anything on your radar that either passed or is about to pass, or something that you want to highlight?
I think we have a deal on bail that seems to be, and then I think that's reinforced by the fact that they wanted to get a second Senate vehicle going as a germaneness backup, I believe, is. Chairwoman Huffman explained. And so I think that if we've checked all the boxes and that the House is a body, and when I say the House is a body, remember you need 100 votes. The Senate, again, the Senate's been voting out whatever, 29-2. So I have no problem with the Senate, and that the governor's team is good with it. I think that we're going to actually have that. Now, if we go to a special session, and I had to guess on what that would be on, I'd probably lay that on bail, but I think we're in a good spot.
Well, now that he said special session, I guess I'll put it out there because I don't want to be blamed for having it happen. What do you think are odds for a special session, especially if we get bail? Are there any issues on your list that?
It's low. I mean, the only other one that I would think would push you to a special session is property tax, but they've already announced that the House and Senate have a deal on property tax relief and some reform coming down. Yeah. Now, I would expect that that's going to be the next big issue coming up. Is not necessarily the relief. We've been doing relief for a long time, but the reform, because what we've learned, and regular viewers of the pod will know this because we scream about this constantly, is we give relief and then the locals take it before it gets to the actual taxpayer. Right? Legislators are fed up with that because they get blamed when their constituents' property taxes continue to go up after they say, well, you gave us all this relief. Like, well, we did. The person you need to be yelling at is your city council member, the county officials who are grabbing that money before it can get to you.
So also as many people vote the innovator to give it away. So
they vote for the Vader, or they vote for the bond, or whatever.
It's complicated.
So look at your local official and then look in the mirror.
I mean, the bottom line is it's not the state legislators; they're the ones providing the relief that the locals are taking away, or that the taxpayers themselves are voting for their own tax increases. So no special session then if you had.
It's not looking like it.
All right, well, we just jinxed it. There it is.
Yeah.
Taxpayer funded lobbying is obviously an issue that's been super high on our list. I thought it was really interesting because I think most people kind of came into this session and thought, taxpayer funded lobbying may have been a long shot. I think there was a lot of progress in terms of explaining to the public what's really going on there. And it's not just the the fact that we're giving tax dollars to well-heeled Austin lobbyists who don't need the money, and these are all tax dollars that should be going to filling potholes and paying, for public safety. So just that in general, we've explained that to the public, but really what it means when what those lobbyists are actually lobbying on, and how that hurts the taxpayer. And I thought it was really interesting that I thought that issue made a lot of progress in this session, and maybe it's not going to get past the finish line in this session, but you had a really interesting op-ed that got published the other day by Senator Mays Middleton, who's been a big-time leader on this issue, is one of the leaders in the Senate. Now, of course, he's thrown his hat in the ring for Texas AG, so he may not be with the Senate next year or next session. However, he wrote an op-ed alongside a famous name, Joe Lonsdale, who, of course, is now a Texas resident. Everybody knows from his tech background. But the two of them teaming up, what do you think that means for the future of this issue? Maybe not this session, but maybe going forward.
I think it's getting to a point where you just can't ignore it anymore, because the same old arguments. In fact, I saw somebody, we tweeted that video of Jose doing the explainer, and some Twitter anon jumped to his comments like, "Oh, this seems like a good idea, but have you ever tried to call your representative?" It's like, yeah, and I get a pretty good response, even though my representative literally disagrees with me on nearly every single position I have. He at least gives me an explanation on why he was going to vote completely opposite to anything that's in my interest. Yeah. But that being said, I don't think that's a tenable position anymore.
No, I mean, your state legislator is incredibly accessible. Right. For people who think that way, they just haven't tried.
Well, no, it's not that I don't think anybody hasn't tried. I think they're just arguing. Yeah. It's a bad faith argument.
The Texas Association of School Boards put out this blog post, explaining why they were opposed to it, and basically that was the argument.
Well, they're opposed to it because it takes away their funding stream.
That's right. Like I said, back to the the money always comes in and it always goes up. But they actually made the argument that school board members, elected school board members, are just too busy to talk to their state legislators, and that they just don't have the time to talk to state legislators. The state legislators, mind you, who are responsible for putting billions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars into the school districts. You don't have time to pick up the phone and talk to them. So I agree. I just think the time.
Well, and it's also like even the laziest legislator knows enough to say, I need to be talking to my...
Andrew.
I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say it. They know enough to say, when I go back to my district, I need to be meeting with my local school boards because it's such a huge part of the budget, and the school boards in this state are so powerful that they probably have more access than anybody. So to say school board members can't meet with their legislators are coming to them.
Right, exactly. And they're back in the district all the time. Yeah. I mean, we always kind of joke about it here, but like members are eager to get back to their districts even during session, right? Like they're adjourning on Thursdays so that they can get back for, Saturday t-ball games and church and whatnot. And so they're still in the district even while they're here in supposed to be in Austin.
Can't wait till Greg comes after me and just like, hey, where are all these papers? I'm like, Greg, I am just too busy to oversee research. Like it's
yeah. Sorry, I know this is 90% of your job, but I'm just too busy to talk to you about it today, so I'll get you that report. All right, I had a bunch of other issues on my list, but is there anything on your list? Anything we'll skip to because we only have a couple more minutes left, so we won't be able to get to do our normal 10-minute drill. So I'll skip to either what you're watching right now or what you're watching for. We've already talked about bail, so we can't use that one again. But is there anything? I'll let our guests go first. Yeah. What are you watching?
I'm gonna go with the fun one. I like doing the fun one. So my wife's in film. She's a producer, and there's a show on Apple TV right now called The Studio, and it's got Seth Rogen in it. He's like this up-and-coming film exec, and he becomes the head of this film studio in Hollywood. It is absolutely hysterical.
I didn't mean like what are you watching
mommy
at
and daddy
home.
Words.
I meant more like what are you watching with the state legislature.
See, I like you can pivot and make it about the film fund. Make it about the film fund.
We're gonna have to cut there, Jefferson. Yeah, no, I'm just kidding. We're not gonna cut. But I clearly didn't explain. Clearly, you never watched the podcast.
I am so ready for session to be over. I'm just thinking about
what am I watching for? Oh man, episode 4.
Have you seen Severance?
Episode 4 of The White Lotus. All right. So when it comes to the state legislature, Andrew, what are you watching for? All right, I'm just kidding. All right, go ahead.
When it comes to the remaining weeks of session, what I'm watching for is what makes its way through the Senate, right? Because after today, 90% of our attention is going to shift to the Senate because the House is just pumping House bills over there right now.
Yep.
And you've got a really narrow window of time. You know, we say, okay, you've still got time because the Senate doesn't have the same deadlines that the House does. But you've got about 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. And so you've got to get the bill heard. You got to get it to the floor. You got to get the Senate to vote that bill off the floor. So seeing what the committees prioritize that are referred to them is really what I'm looking at right now.
Okay, cool. All right, Derek. What are you watching on Saturday nights?
Yeah. so I'm not watching. Wait, you said you took White Lotus?
No, I took the studio. You can take White Lotus.
I don't know what these are. Like, I'm like the least popular pop culture informed person in this office.
You're a new fan of Walton Goggins after that Saturday Night Live sketch.
That is true. I'm waiting for a next Walton Goggins sketch on Saturday Night Live about the Second Amendment.
Is that on Nick at Night? What is that?
Yeah, Nick at Night. I was about to say, and I'm the least informed one. Okay. No, I'm
completely gone off the rails.
Yeah, no, this is what we do at the end, and then he'll butcher the quote, and then we'll get out of here.
We'll get out of here.
We have a pattern of practice.
We have a formula, Andrew.
Breaking the fourth wall, really letting them in. No, I'm going to be looking at what the final disposition and content of HB2 is going to be. I'm sorry, HB2, the funding.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's happening. That's happening right now too. All the actions over in the House, and everybody's following that. But HB2 is
well, actually, that's going on. Yeah, literally going on right now. Yeah. Now, are you sitting down, Brian? Because I have a shocking revelation for you. The educrat establishment is saying it's not enough.
Not enough money.
It's never enough
money. Well, like I said,
but if you inflation and population adjust it since back in the 1800s, it's actually less funding than it was in 1837. So
yeah. If you do the math. So what am I watching for? Actually, where I thought you were going with that was the Hollywood subsidies. It was like the film subsidies. Yeah. I thought that's where you're going with that, and then it sort of dawned on me that like you were literally talking.
I was actually talking about what am I doing when I'm
not
watching.
So now I'm thinking like, man, what am I watching at home? Mostly sports is usually what's on.
It was interesting though. They paraded McConaughey and Woody Harrelson out for this. It was a big deal.
Yeah, we'll see if that. So is that one of the bills? So if it doesn't, is there a House companion for the subsidies?
Yeah,
there is.
I mean, it's just it's been off the radar.
Not so much.
If you look at it, it's probably going to pass.
Well, for us, energy, still looking at energy. Yeah. I know SB 715 is the hot topic of controversy. So I'm going to be following that one because that one's, it's just the next level of trying to shore up our grid to make sure the bad things don't happen because we have too much unreliable energy on the grid. So we'll see where that debate goes because that's a pretty heavyweight battle between the lobbyists and the special interests and the legislators.
You got a lot of dispatchables arguing for the non-dispatchables.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird. It's kind of a weird bedfellow thing going on. So anyway, it's just going to be interesting to see how all that shakes out. So anyway, Andrew, this was a lot of fun. Thanks for coming in and having fun with us. And Derek, I like the new look. I like being best friends, but I mean, if this is your
it is 100 degrees right now, and you want me to put on a vest? What
we got hot lights going and everything
seriously.
else. All right. Well, at least I'm consistent with the
you're on brand.
Wardrobe on brand. All right. Well, thank you for listening to our insanity today. And watching as well. And as we like to say at the end of the show, because we have a formula, in the immortal words of Sam Houston, do good.
Butcher this.
Do
What's
good.
the quote?
Do good and risk the consequences. We'll see you next time.